This is the Inspection Pro Joe podcast, where we break down everything you need to know to grow a successful home inspection company. Join hosts Joey and Jake as they share insider knowledge and chat with the industry's best on how to take your business to the next level.
All right, welcome back to Inspection Pro Joe, episode 36. Today, Joey and I have with us Kristy Mast of Delaware. Kristy is the owner of Pro-Spect Home Inspection Services, and we are incredibly happy to have Kristy with us today because we are going to talk about growth and specifically scaling your business using social media, leadership techniques, and much, much more. And one of the big points of topic, I think, today is going to be the book Traction, which Kristy has implemented and Joey's actually reading right now. So Thank you very much for joining us, Kristy. We're happy to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Kristy. I remember talking to your husband probably 2 years ago, and I think you were just over $1 million, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, and now you're closing in on $3 million. So we're extremely excited to have you. I know you're going to just provide so much value to our listeners. Because that's doubling your business in a couple of years when you've already have $1 million company. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. It doesn't feel like that long ago. I'd probably say about 5 years ago, we were at 500,000 and we thought that was pretty good. We're in a small state of under 1 million people in our entire state. And we just had no idea what you could grow an inspection company to. So, we were thinking, how much more can we really grow? Maybe a little bit more, but where do we go and where do we start and who do we hire? And really spend some time investing in some coaching ourselves. We realized we had to increase our glass ceiling to expand our thinking. And doing that, it just kind of opened up a whole new world to seeing other inspection companies and realizing, man, we can really grow this into a business. And some of the motivators for us were kind of twofold. One, my mom at 58 had a massive stroke, and my kids were still young. She was a huge part of our lives. Yeah. She survived, but she's greatly limited because of the stroke. Yeah. And it just made us realize life is short. We're never guaranteed tomorrow. And so we want to take full opportunity of today and do what we can. But also we realized, man, what if something were to happen to Wes or something were to happen to me and he would need to be by my bedside, right? We wanted to get from this owning your job mentality to owning the business and scaling it in a way where if something happened to me or something happened to Wes, or maybe it's not even bad. Maybe it's we want to go away for our anniversary, or we have a baby. Like we just had a baby 9 months ago.
Congratulations.
We were able to take a significant amount of time off to really enjoy that. And that's harder to do when you own your job, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that what are you going to do if you can't do it? Or at some point you want to stop doing it. How do you continue to have that income coming in?
No, that's a great point too. I think most people think like, it's so risky owning a business or growing, and what happens if something doesn't work out? But you brought up the other alternative. Like, what happens if something happens to you? Then your business is gone if it's just you. Especially if you don't have those systems in place. So how'd you establish your business to run and scale on its own with kind of out you and Wes being there to really oversee it? What does that look like now, and what does that continue to look like for you guys in the future?
Sure. So I know a lot of people say, business is great until people get involved, right? So it's that transition, that growing pain between it being you or maybe just 1 or 2 people to growing to a team of, 20, 30, 40 people. It's just different, right? Now your primary job is not inspecting. Your primary job is leading and growing and developing people. And that may not necessarily be where you're most passionate. That is the area that Wes and I are most passionate about. And so that's where we put a lot of our focus and emphasis on. Wes and I do some coaching as well. And what we find is that as business owners, we tend to, we have a need and then we quickly want to be like, I just need to find somebody to do it. And I pass it off super fast without doing the proper training. And so therefore you have high turnover, or you get frustrated because they're not doing what you want, you want them to do. And so first off, it takes a lot more time than you think to invest and develop your people. So some of the things that we were really intentional with doing, and you mentioned Traction, we're going to get into that. We started really identifying what our core values are. What are the things in which our company is going to operate on? Because your culture is going to be determined either by who's in your company or by you. It's going to happen. It's the personality of your business, right? So either you're going to say this is the personality, and you're going to hire people that fit within that culture that you want, or you're just going to hire people and it's going to make its own culture, and it may not be the culture that you desire. Yeah. So, in the beginning, when you're hiring people and it's taking a lot of time and you're small, we were very intentional saying we need to get the right people on the bus. And so we did that by, identifying our core values and then taking that to the next level with, okay, we don't want these just to be words on a wall, right? Everyone could say, oh, it's on my website, it's on my wall. And their team can't cite them. The business owner sometimes can't cite them. And so we thought, okay, now that we have these, how do we live, breathe, and work these core values? Yeah. And so everything from when we're interviewing, our interview questions aren't just your standard, what are your strengths and your weaknesses? Our questions align with each of our core values. So like, for example, our first one is start with wow. And then we have ones reinvent continuously. So our questions would be things like, tell us about a time when you went above and beyond to wow a client or customer. Or what was the last thing that you did to reinvent yourself? What's the most recent podcast or book that you've listened to or read? Yeah. And so we build our interview questions around our core values.
Wow.
And then from there, sorry, you just interrupt me when you need to, but and then from there, even like our annual reflection. So we don't have our traditional annual reviews. Our annual reflections have all of our core values on them. And our team has to put in there how they demonstrated that core value this year. And we give some questions to prompt some ideas on what that may look like for an inspector or an office person. But it's just a lot different than maybe just saying, your traditional evaluation every year. And so we put a huge focus on that piece alone. So that's really aligning the who's we want on our team and making sure our culture, because without that, Joey and Jake, you can get people on your bus, but they may not be the right people, and you're not going to go very far if you don't have the right people on the bus with you. And so it felt like for us, that was the foundation. We got to get the right people first.
And when did you come to that realization, Kristy? When did you say, all right, something's got to change, or maybe it just kind of happened organically? When was that? Because I feel like, having a vision, having these core values, a lot of companies don't have them. I would think actually the majority of them don't. And they do exactly what you just said. They just hire people to fill these positions and they're just looking for bodies. So was there a realization that hit you like, oh my God, things need to change because we're stagnant? Or was it just the natural progression that you saw coming?
Yeah. So obviously you learn through a lot of mistakes, and I can't necessarily pinpoint, just one mistake that made that pivotal change for us. But I think as you grow your team, if you don't have that under control, it starts consuming your life, right? So, the first hire you do when you're early on, you tend to make some stupid hires. I mean, we all do it, right? You're desperate. You wait too long to bring on your first inspector. You don't realize how long it's going to take to train them. You don't realize things like, we would ask, do you have any issue getting in roofs or crawl spaces? And what does everybody say? No, I don't have any issue. And then you hire them, and then you realize they're scared to death to get on the roof, and so things like that. Or, how are you with technology? Oh, I'm great with technology. And then you realize, oh, they are not very good with technology. Yeah. So then you start putting pieces in place to protect yourself from those things, right? So now during our interview process, step number 3, I guess, whatever position they're going into, we have them do something that demonstrates that skill that's beyond our values, right? First is the value fit. We need to make sure you're a value and culture fit for us. Then we're going to look a little bit more at some of the basic skills. So if you're an inspector, we're going to have you do a ride along. We're going to see how you feel on a ladder. If you're a marketing person, we're going to have you do a presentation for us. I know you said you're comfortable to presenting, but let's see how comfortable you are. Yeah. And the same thing with the client coordinator. We do a little crash course on, ISN is our software that we use, and see how quickly they can duplicate that. And so you come across those things and you realize the cost of hiring poorly, how much of an impact that has on your business, and the time and resources it takes. It's a lot more efficient to spend the time at first. And it is a drain. I get it. Like, the amount of people that the applications that come in, the amount of screening you have to do, the amount of interviews you have to do, just being patient to find that right person. It does take time, but in the long run, it'll work out so much better for you. And so we just kind of had to learn that the hard way. I think we all do to an extent. And but then when you get those right people on the right bus and getting them in the right seats, that's where the magic really happens.
Yeah. No, that's so, and I love that you bring up the core values during the interview process too, because you're aligning them and you're looking for those leaders that are going to rise up naturally because they buy into those values early on. When I look at like the guys that are leading my company or my general manager, he was one of the guys that completely bought into the vision that was cast. And what's sad was we didn't keep up with it. It kind of went to the wayside, and our business hasn't grown as rapidly as it probably could have. And so I know there's companies out there that you're wondering why you can't grow, why am I staying stagnant? And like Kristy's saying, a lot of it has to do with getting everybody on the same page, rowing in the same direction, buying into the culture that you ultimately get to create as the leader. Or if maybe you have other leaders in your organization that can help you create it, maybe they have different perspectives, but you need to get everybody rowing the same direction because it can be catastrophic. Especially when you're at a bigger size too. I almost feel like there's a lot more to lose because you have high cost of payroll. You have, you have people making a lot of money in some key positions that if they're not the right person for the job, your business will just not grow like it can,
Absolutely.
So that's great that you guys have realized that early on or a couple of years ago that was something important. And now you're reaping the benefits 2 years later. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it is one of those things where, you wish you would have learned it faster, but you think, man, if only my younger self knew this. We've been in business now for 11 years. So it probably took us halfway through, before like, okay, if we're going to scale this and grow this, we almost have to take a step back and that we have to, get our foundation strong and then start building up from there. And so you had mentioned earlier traction. It was a huge resource for us as well. So what we found was happening is as we were growing more people and you're in this rapid growth mode, Wes and I realized that, man, we would think we told everybody something, but we actually only told one person. Or, and so you realize there's the communication gaps or our leadership knew things but the rest of the team, didn't know what was going on. And so then we really had to say, okay, there's a lot of moving pieces now. We need to do a better job at our communication. You get to that point where you feel like you're constantly in meetings, but you're not necessarily sure if you're being productive because not everybody's getting everything done that you're talking about. And so then we hit, that growing pain, and traction was huge for that because then we started, meeting every week. You guys are familiar with traction, but meeting every week for our level 10 meetings. And that's when we then developed, okay, what are those numbers that we need to look at on a regular basis to see how we're operating? And then we can make changes and adapt as needed. And so, every week we meet faithfully, right? Because before what we would do is we would meet and then someone would be on vacation and somebody would be sick. And then 3 weeks would go by before we'd meet again. And then we'd be good for 2 weeks. And so we weren't consistent, and therefore you don't get consistent results, right? You have to put in that consistent work. And so we were like, that's it. Like, we are all committing unless we are off, like we're on vacation or there, like someone died. We're going to be at this meeting. And it's hard because there's been things like a presentation opportunity, and we've turned those down if they are at our level 10 meeting time. And so we were just determined we need to meet. We need to have this time to all get on the same page. And so you look at your numbers as part of that. You're talking about any potential issues in the IDS, the identify, discuss, and solve. And then you're also coming up with your to-dos. Yeah. So what are those things that you need to everyone needs to accomplish, this next week? You're assigning names to them. And then so the next week you have that built-in accountability when you're reporting out what things got done or didn't get done. And if you start to notice that 90% of what you set out didn't get done, then that's not good, right? And so you're trying are we making too big of goals? Like, do we need to simplify what we're putting down? And it makes you a little bit more, it'd be better to be realistic and accomplish it than to say we're going to do all these grand things and then get no traction whatsoever.
Yeah. And so for those listening, we're talking about the book Traction by Gino Wickman. If you're a business owner and you haven't read this book, it is truly amazing. And it will definitely set you up and get you on track. But Chris, you bring up a great point, because as business owners, we can be so consumed with like things that come in and things that disrupt our calendar. And, you know, what you just said, how you set a meeting and you push it out because somebody's sick or somebody's not available or something else came up and you're like, oh, you know, I'll just push that. But those meetings are so essential on maintaining your scorecard or making sure things are so on track that you'd almost rather push off a client presentation because of how important that meeting is of accomplishing those high dollar tasks. Because when you were saying that, I was like, I've done that. We get caught up into that.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden 2 months go by and you haven't even had that meeting yet because things keep getting in the way because it's not a priority to you.
In fact, what you'll find, and so you've started, you know, reading through it and implementing it. But I remember when we first started, we were like, there's no way we would have enough stuff to talk about every single week for 90 minutes. Like, there's no way. So we, even after reading the book the first month, we're like, we'll do every other week, right? There's no way
I love it.
we could do weekly. And, and what we had to do is there's a great little YouTube video that just gives the overview, because the structure of the level 10 meeting is simple, but yet it's easy to go into bad habits and go off on rabbit trails and not be as effective and efficient as you can be. And so at the start of all of our meetings, probably for like, I don't know, maybe even 2 months, we'd watch this short little 5-minute video overview of the meeting structure to help put us in the right mindset.
Oh, wow.
To be consistent with it, because you'll find, especially when you're discussing issues, that can consume your entire meeting, and therefore you don't get that traction that you need. And so, but we very quickly found that, okay, we do have enough to discuss every week. And so probably after the first month, you know, we started doing it consistently every week from that point on.
And how much time are you focusing on the issue side of it? Is it a small portion of the meeting or?
Yeah, no, the issue part of it's actually the largest part of the meeting. I think one of the challenges, those of you who may be listening who've done traction maybe can relate to this. So before you get to the IDSing section, you're going over the previous week's to-dos. This is where we can tend to get hung up the most, and we have to correct ourselves. So when you're going over the previous week's to-dos, you have a tendency to want to report out. So as you're going through and people may be reporting out on why something wasn't done, it sparks new conversation. And what you're supposed to do with traction is, if it's anything that requires a conversation, you're going to put it in the IDS list. So you're not going to dive into it right now. You're just going to say, all right, let's, like a parking lot kind of, we're going to put that up in the parking lot. Let's finish going through our to-dos. Then we're going to look at our list of issues that came up, and it might be something related to your scorecard. Then we're going to prioritize what we're going to talk about. Then we're going to talk about it there. What happens is a lot of times as you're going through your to-dos, you're problem solving throughout the entire thing. And when you do that, you may not spend your time focusing on the most important thing that you want to spend your time focused on. You think about with these meetings, a lot of times you may have somebody from your office, somebody that's representing your inspection side, somebody that's representing marketing, and all of their needs are very important to them, right? And so as a company, though, you are having to prioritize what's the most important thing we have to focus on now, not the easiest, which sometimes feels the best because it's like, oh, we can knock that out and solve that right now.
Now that's huge too. So when on these meetings, you're bringing in your leaders, your marketing team, your inspector manager, and you and Wes are all sitting in on those meetings. Basically, all your leaders are coming together of each department to discuss the vision and the business as a whole and make those decisions all together.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's no longer on Wes and I's shoulders. You know, at one point it was Wes and I, you know, make the decisions. Wes and I have to implement any new ideas. Wes and I, you know, we're the chief everything officer kind of idea. So now it's really facilitating that conversation with the team. And you realize very quickly, you know, Wes and Kristy can do X amount, but Wes Christie plus 5 others, can 10x that result.
Yeah.
And now with that comes a certain lack of control. It comes with more motivation. It may not be done the exact same way that you would have done it. But that's really part of where I would say the next part of that really helped scale our growth was we a few years ago started being very intentional with building our leadership. Creating, a leadership table where we started bringing people around us so they could hear our conversations, they could be a part of those decision-making process, and so that they could step into higher levels of leadership that would allow Wes and I to start stepping further and further back and being able to take time off to go on vacation or with having the baby.
Yeah.
And so, being intentional, and it takes a lot more time to invest in your leadership. It's a long-term game. It's not a short-term game. The short term would be just telling everybody what to do and getting it done quick, right? Long-term game is how do I help equip these so that in a year or two from now, they can make these decisions without me. And that takes more intentionality and work than just telling everybody what to do.
And how do these leaders show themselves to you? Is it because they're bought in, or what other traits are you looking for to fill these seats?
So I'll tell you something recently that we've done as a way to really help identify this, and it's working great. So yes, you'll notice, who in your company is really demonstrates your values at a high level. Who is, stepping up to take on more responsibility. And I always tell our leaders, listen, before you give somebody a full-blown leadership position, give them little bits to practice. See how they do first, right? Especially if they're on your team, there's no reason why you should move them into a leadership position and be surprised at how they perform. So for example, let's talk inspectors, right? So if you have somebody that you're like, I think this person has some leadership capabilities. This might be somebody that want to put in a inspector manager position, right? Start seeing, maybe give them, have them start listening to some complaints, or we call them issue resolutions. Maybe give them one to respond in an email to, or go out to see, start giving them little bits and pieces and see how they do. You may quickly find out, because a lot of people think leadership is a title and that's just the next stage, the next step in your career. And so a lot of people say they want leadership, but then when it comes to actually doing some of the responsibility, you quickly realize, okay, they self-realize maybe this isn't what I'm passionate about. Yeah. Or you quickly realize they need more training and development. But at least you figured it out then before you moved them into a position. Yeah. And so one of the things that we've been doing here this last year is we created a leadership academy. And we have it open to everybody in our team. And it's Wes and I have just been doing different teachings on different topics. And so it's open to everybody. But if you're in leadership, you have to have completed it. It doesn't guarantee you a leadership position. But we're going to look when a leadership position opens. This is where we're looking first. And so it takes commitment, right? We're going to see who's going to put the work in to build and develop themselves as leaders. They have to finish the class. If they cut out halfway through, they don't get credit for that. But it really helps us see who's going to put in that work and that effort into finishing it and really developing themselves. And then when that position arises, we can look at that class and we get a better idea to see how their growth is, what their heart is. They get a better idea of what leadership means at Pro-Spect, because we can all relate, depending on your work experience, there's some very toxic leadership styles and toxic cultures. And your staff are coming from all those different places. And so you really need to set the frame of what leadership looks like in your organization.
Yeah, I love that, because leaders aren't born, they're made, right? You can become a leader if you're not one, and it just takes doing it, right? It just takes that extra step. What does that academy look like? What are the steps that you make them go through? Is it an online class that you guys have put together videos, or?
Yeah, so right now we have it on Google Classroom. We are looking to put it more on a online platform that we can then, because we've had quite a bit of interest of even just some other inspection companies that we work with, wanting to put some of their developing leaders into it. So we're looking at scaling it outside of just what we're doing within our organization right now.
Oh, cool.
But we have several different classes. So the first one is Leadership Defined. And that's where we spend time just talking about the basics of what leadership is, right? We talk about things, they're not born, they're made. We do some personality assessments. Strength-based leadership is another great book. And they do that book and assessment as part of it, really discovering where are their strengths as a leader, because that's where your sweet spot's going to be. We do the DISC personality assessment as part of that. And we do some podcasts in there. And then Wes and I also do some video training as part of that. And then the next class we have is the vision, values, and culture. So that's where we're really doing a deep dive on the importance of values. How do you create values? What does that mean? What is culture? And then we have one on hiring. So the whole hiring process and just how important that is, what to look for. Firing, having those difficult conversations, improvement plans. I mean, all those, people are, like I said, everyone says business is great till people get involved. Working with different inspection companies, like that is probably the most frequent challenge is, okay, now I've grown, now I have a team, and this was a lot easier when it was just me. And so if you're not developing yourself as a leader, either personally as the business owner or then the people you have on your team, you're going to bottleneck and you may even crash and decide I never want to do that again. It can hurt, at times. But you have to push through that if you want to see that healthy growth.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So we actually need to take a moment to hear a word from our sponsor, but we'll be right back.
The home inspection industry is highly competitive, and you need an edge to stay on top. You certainly can't afford to give profit away for no reason. But what if I told you credit card processors may be overcharging you and robbing you of profits you've worked hard to earn? It's time to put an end to being overcharged for payment processing. It's time to take back your profits. That's why we put together a free report, How to Avoid Being Overcharged by Your Payment Processor. Head over to takebackyourprofits.com, download the report, and put an end to being overcharged for credit card processing. You've worked hard for your sales, and you deserve to keep it. What are you waiting for? Go to takebackyourprofits.com and download your report today.
Welcome back. We are back with Kristy Mast, and I have to say this has so far been a absolutely packed episode of great information on how to scale and how to handle a lot of the details here. So what I really wanted to ask you, Kristy, is how does someone who's listening to this and think, wow, this is overwhelming, there's a lot here that I'd have to implement if I want to take my company from here to here, from where I am to where I want to be. So what I have to ask you is, how do you break this down into little steps for someone who wants to start off the right way with this very solid foundation and not just think about implementing it all at once? So what's maybe a little book to read or something that they have to do now, a system, some sort of leadership technique, or communication, method of communication? What do you think someone has to do now?
I remember that feeling of being overwhelmed, seeing some bigger companies and thinking, oh my gosh, like we can hit 1 million? Like how are we going to hit a million? Felt so big and so overwhelming. And I think as far as success goes, it's amazing how if you just the consistency, stay on it year after year, you just see that consistent growth. We've not had, there's some companies out there that have crazy growth. I know some people might be listening and thinking, well, that sounds crazy growth, right? I feel like ours has been more organic, healthy, sustainable growth. It really has just been little steps every single year, that's helped us get from that 500 to the 3 million we're going to hit now. But there's been a few things that I feel like in the beginning to really help give you that consistency. And we mentioned traction. That's huge. You think about what's the one thing I can do to make everything else easier. That's one. I would recommend that book because that will walk you through a lot of what we talked about in regards to, your values. And it has an organizational checkup, they call it, that you can either take yourself or as a leadership team or your whole company to see where your gaps are and then start working on them one by one. So I really like that survey. So traction is one of those, one thing you can do that will help make 10 other things easier. Love that book. I think for Wes and I, a huge part was having some coaching. So whether that's one-on-one coaching, whether that's, joining a coaching community, having that built-in system of checking in with other people. In our case, it was a quarterly basis, with Inspection Go, where we go and meet with other inspection owners and we're reporting on where we're at and what we're doing. And then we have 3 months of implementation. And then at that point, you're coming back again and you're saying, okay, where are we? What else do we need to do? And so having that consistent rhythm of accountability and motivation was huge, because sometimes as entrepreneurs, and we probably have some serial entrepreneurs on this call, it's like, oh, squirrel, let me go do this business venture, or let me do this business venture, or let me get into this. And we were very intentional with saying, no, we're going to stay laser focused on this, because if we can stay laser focused on this can support all of our other business ventures we want in the future. You kind of like that snowball effect, if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, it's like, if we can get this will help everything else. But if we do a little bit of everything, we're not going to see that consistent growth. So for us, getting involved in a community, getting involved on one-on-one coaching, really building ourselves up, gave us that accountability of just every 3 months. What am I doing? Okay, I did that. Next 3 months, what's the next quarter? What are we focusing on? What are we getting done? And then celebrating. I think that's something we really stink at as entrepreneurs, because we're always focused on what's next. What else do we need to do? That sometimes we don't even realize what we've accomplished in a year, what we've put in place. So celebrating those. I would say another key thing that we implemented, besides people being a challenge for a lot of business owners, is the financial side. So a book that I highly recommend on that is Profit First. And that's a system for organizing your money. So you no longer get in this like, okay, my bank account's full. Oh, shoot, payroll, I'm poor again, And then, oh, I have so much money. Let's buy, radon machines. And then like, oh, shoot, we're poor again. And so just constantly judging how you feel as an entrepreneur based on how your bank account's looking. And that payroll number just gets bigger and bigger and scarier and scarier. And so Profit First was a great book as far as getting your financial side of the business, you feeling more confident there. So I feel like Profit First for the finances, traction for more of the system, organization, tracking your numbers, and then the coaching to really help hold yourself accountable at accomplishing the tasks, and just look at it as a quarter at a time. Each 3 months, what can I accomplish, get it done, and then move on to the next thing. And if you implement, 3 rocks traction calls on like 3 big goals in a quarter, 3, 6, 9, 12 in a year, you're making some really good progress. You do that over 5 years and you're at 3 million. I know it sounds simple, but it really is that simple. It's just staying consistent with it.
Well, I think you're so right too, because it's the simplicity that I think confuses people. I think, especially as business owners, we think we have to do so many things to move us forward. And what we get a hold of these 10, 12 different things, and we become overwhelmed, and we probably only accomplish maybe one, if that, rather than just focusing hard on the 3, getting that done. All right, what's the next 3? Getting that done. And that's where simplicity kills you, because we think it can't be this simple. Yeah. I got to be doing this, and then this is shiny, this is shiny, this is shiny, and we just get all over the place. Because I'm that way. I'm ADD. I'm like, ooh. That's why I have a whiteboard over here, because I lose focus very easily.
And that's what's great about having your weekly calls with Traction, or even having your values and culture, right? Because then you can start to look at, so even on a personal note with Wes and I, we're at a place now where I'm like, all right, what's most important to us as a family unit? And then we need to take all of our opportunities and look at it through that lens. So for example, it's really important to me that our family gets to travel together. And so if we're looking at a business venture or opportunity that's going to limit that, then that may not be the business opportunity we want to do, right? Because so often we'll say we want certain things, but then we do things in our life that don't support them. And so you got to look at those opportunities. If you're like, it's really important to me that my family and I eat dinner together every night, but then you decide to do some venture that's going to require you to be working from 5 to 9 o'clock every night, like what your goals aren't aligning with where you see yourself. And we could be our own worst enemies with that, because we do like opportunity. Like entrepreneurs are like, we want that challenge, we want that new opportunity, but we don't want to lose what's most important in the process. And so always thinking about ultimately and not everybody wants to grow a $3 million business, right? Completely get that. Not everybody has a passion for developing people, and that's becomes a huge part of your role in a $3 million company. And so some people just want a team of 2 or 3 because they want to have a strong business that can operate without them, but they don't want the hassle that comes with, larger companies. So thinking about what is it that you want in your life? What does the ideal life look like for you, for your family? And then start building it, from there. I mean, we do find that there's a sweet spot at $1 million in revenue as far as you have a team of about 6. That is a sweet spot that you could operate with, some involvement, but not a huge involvement, and still get, the freedom. But for Wes and I, we wanted to be able to travel with our family and our kids. They're growing up fast. And we were like, what would it take for us to be able to leave our business for 2 months and it's still to not only operate and sustain, but grow in our absence? And that was our mindset. And so that's how we're growing our business. But that may not be, what everybody wants.
Your baby is so cute, by the way. I think I was watching a video of her on Facebook. Was she eating or something? And it was so cute.
Yeah. So those of you listening, we have a 15, a 13, 11, and then a surprise 9-month-old.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome. Now that's full. I love that. Now, this has been incredibly great, guys. Thank you so much, Kristy, for being on our show. I mean, so many golden nuggets. And guys, go back and listen to this episode, because there's so many key things in here and steps that you can take that are just going to really set you up for success. Even if you don't want to grow $1 million business, a 2 million, a 3 million, but having those values and having those core values, because like Kristy was saying, that's going to help you filter out things in your own personal life, not just in your business. And so that's huge, and it's a key. And, I know from my own personal experience, I've struggled with this. And because of that, my business hasn't grown probably the rate that it should grow. And now I'm having to kind of revamp and restart some of these things. So if you're a single man shop or 2 people, now's the time to do it. Don't think you have to be big already to start implementing this stuff. Now is the time, because it's going to make your life so much easier moving forward. And you're going to skip the hurdles that we've had to go through.
Learn from others' mistakes as much as you can, right? And save yourself a little headache.
Exactly. No, but this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with our audience. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of inspectors are going to appreciate you coming on and sharing your business and sharing your values and sharing your exponential growth with us. So thank you so much, Kristy. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys, for having me. It's been a blast. I love what you're doing, and I love being able to help others be able to accomplish, the dreams that they have set. So thank you for having me on here.
Thank you.
Well, it was our pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you very much again for your wonderful insight and your inspiration. That's one thing I'll pull from this. I didn't want to even interrupt most of the time, because you were just so passionate and knowledgeable about scaling and leadership and growth. And it was a great podcast. So we're going to have to talk about having you back on. But thank you very much to Kristy. Thank you to our audience. And we actually have some more great guests coming in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned. You will not be disappointed. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Inspection Pro Joe podcast. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss our next episode. This episode was produced by Jake Aronson. This has been a Pair Payments production.